Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to step away from the Tory skip fire to cool down for a moment and discuss the latest on the future of Brexit Britain's car manufacturing industry in particular. You know, with the transition towards electric cars, we're currently unable to manufacture in Britain without being hit by prohibitively expensive tariffs when selling to Europe. However, despite the inefficient schemes which the government are using to try and tread water, which are proving very costly to the UK taxpayer, there is a solution. It's a surprisingly easy solution to arrange. The problem is that Brexit purity prevents the Tories taking advantage, so it could represent an easy win for a new Labour government next year. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I've talked at various times about the major threats to UK car production. In order to qualify for tariff-free trade in Europe, a certain percentage of the car, or indeed any product we manufacture, but cars in this case, must be deemed to have been produced in the UK, to meet the rules of origin. At the moment, we're talking 45%. It's going to rise to 60% for electric cells at the end of this year. British-based car producers cannot meet this rules of origin requirement for electric cars, and so we'll see 10% tariffs added to the cost of sales outside the UK from the end of this year, unless something changes. We're not going to be able to sell anything other than, the top end luxury market with that. And even then it'll be less competitive. I mean, 10% on a very expensive car is quite a lot of extra money. This is an existential threat to car manufacture in Britain. We always knew it would be. Even the one economist who you could find to try and sound positive about Brexit, Tory stalwart Professor Patrick Minford, said that leaving the EU would obliterate British car production. The preferred outcome for producers would be to rejoin the single market. They didn't really want it to leave. But there's no prospect of doing that for some time. Not only is there no political momentum to attempt it right now, but there's also no legal mechanism to make it happen, certainly not quickly, without joining the EU proper again. And that also wouldn't be quick. We can't get back into the single market without a bespoke deal, which would need almost every other country in Europe to agree to it. The government's preferred option has been to build up the production of constituent parts in the UK, with a special emphasis on the cells needed to power electric cars. But this is inefficient. Cells produced in Britain cannot be supplied to the rest of Europe easily due to the full customs and standards controls which exist for all British exports. Basically, there isn't really a viable business model for producing these cells in Britain. But without them, we can't sell our electric cars in Europe competitively. But you may say, well, we're going to have a factory now. Tata have agreed to build the Jaguar Land Rover gigafactory in Britain rather than Spain. Yes, but this was because the government dangled a huge carrot somewhere, between 500 and 800 million pounds in state aid in order to attract that investment. Not remotely worth it in terms of pure financial returns, but necessary for car production in general. The Tories are hailing this as a Brexit win, but it's actually a Brexit loss. If we were still in at least the single market and customs union, even if not the EU, not only could we have more competitively won that investment without hundreds of millions in state aid, but even if we still missed out, let's say Spain won it, okay, wouldn't have mattered that much. Yes, we'd have liked the investment, but it wouldn't have mattered to the UK car production because we could have just imported the cells from Spain, just-in-time supply chain as well, no difficulties at the border, straight in, build them into the cars produced in Britain and then still export them to the EU tariff-free. Being in the single market would have made it easier and quicker to import the cells, and being in the customs union would mean no tariffs on selling those cars. So every penny of state aid used to secure this investment is a Brexit cost. And it was a lot of pennies used. And because we cannot produce these cells commercially without that state aid, we are going to have to keep shelling out public money to keep it here. But there is another way. There are countries outside the EU, outside the single market, outside the customs union, the customs union being more relevant here, some outside, in fact, many of them are actually outside Europe. Most of this group of countries aren't even in Europe, but they have common rules of origin with the EU. Outside the customs union, just as Britain is, but they can import between one another as part of their production process, still meet rules of origin, therefore not have tariffs applied. It's called the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention, or PEM. If we were part of this, we could import electric cells from anywhere else within the region, including, of course, the EU. We could use them in the manufacture of electric cars in Britain. And then we could sell those cars to the EU, still tariff-free, because the stuff we'd import from the EU would count the same as if it was produced in Britain, whether or not it was. So why haven't we joined this group? You bloody well tell me. The EU are not being difficult about it. In fact, there was a report this weekend in the Financial Times saying Brussels is actively encouraging the UK to join. See, the issue at the moment is the UK government is trying to persuade the EU to extend the current rules of origin requirements for another 2 years, as well as shelling out the best part of £1 billion to bribe investment, which isn't otherwise commercially viable. The EU isn't terribly keen on extending the current rules of origin requirement because it would be counterproductive to their own efforts to build up their own electric cell production. Look at it from the EU's point of view. If car manufacturers are not able to sell electric cars produced in Britain viably in the EU, what will happen? Well, more production will shift to EU countries. Well, isn't that a benefit to EU countries? Yeah. The EU acts in the interests of its members. Otherwise, why would you be in the EU if it was going to allow third countries to remain unnecessarily competitive with their own members? The EU has got no reason to extend. But it's more than happy for us to join a group of countries in North Africa and the Middle East which has preferential trade terms for meeting rules of origin. But Tories gonna Tory, and they're not interested. Disappointing. However, the good news, well, for Labour anyway, is that Labour will doubtless join with all haste. Starmer's already been talking about wanting to harmonise standards with the EU. There is literally nothing else you have to do in order to qualify for this PEM membership. Also got me to thinking about Starmer's promise to negotiate a better deal with the EU. I talked recently about our bargaining position, when it comes to trying to get a closer arrangement based on the trade and cooperation agreement. I did make a suggestion that, we have some leverage for talks, but not necessarily very much. Well, what if although Starmer is putting the focus on the weakness of the trade and cooperation agreement, what he's actually thinking is there are existing deals out there like the PEM, which would be very easy wins and require no real negotiations at all, as long as we're happy to harmonise standards, and Labour are not about lowering standards. As I've said in the past, Brexit has done a great deal of inevitable damage to our economy and trade, but there's also damage which wasn't inevitable. This is damage that the Tories chose to inflict on us out of some warped sense of Brexit purity. Maybe agreements like this will form the low-hanging fruit for Labour, the easy wins which will make a real difference to our production and trade, while work in the background works towards getting ready for a more explicitly pro-EU offer for the following election. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.